Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work in marketing at a mid-sized company downtown, but I have this burning passion for travel that keeps me going through the mundane weekdays. I save up every penny I can, research destinations for months, and plan these amazing trips that make all those late nights worth it. This particular vacation had been in the works for almost a year. I've been working overtime, skipping weekend plans, and even brown bagging lunch every day just to afford this 2 week getaway to Thailand. The beaches, the temples, the food. I've been dreaming about it for months. My bags were packed 3 days early and I showed up at the airport 2 hours before my flight, practically vibrating with excitement. So there I was sitting at gate B12, scrolling through my phone and checking my itinerary for the 100th time. The boarding process was going smoothly, families with small children first, then first class, then my group. I was in that happy travel bubble where everything feels possible and the world seems full of adventure. That's when the chaos started. A guy in an expensive-looking suit came sprinting down the terminal corridor, dragging this massive suitcase behind him. The wheels were making this awful screeching sound against the floor, and he was huffing and puffing like he'd just run a marathon. His face was red, his tie was askew, and he had this look of absolute panic mixed with determination. He skidded to a stop right at our gate, nearly knocking over a little old lady in the process. The thing is, our plane had already pulled away from the gate. I could see it through the window, slowly making its way toward the runway. The gate agent was already cleaning up her station, clearly done with the boarding process. But this guy, let's call him the businessman, wasn't having any of it. The businessman started shouting at the gate agent to stop and wait, demanding that she hold the plane. His voice was loud and desperate, echoing through the terminal. The gate agent looked up from her computer and politely explained that the flight had already departed. She mentioned that they had made several announcements and that the boarding process was completed on time. The businessman's face turned even redder when he declared this was completely unacceptable. He told her he was an important businessman who couldn't afford to miss this flight, and he demanded that she bring the plane back right now. I nearly choked on my coffee. Bring it back? Like, radio the pilot and ask him to do a U-turn on the tarmac? The audacity was breathtaking. The gate agent remained incredibly professional and explained that once a flight has taken off, they can't recall it due to safety reasons and international regulations. She offered to help him find other flights available later that day. The businessman became even more agitated and demanded to speak to her supervisor immediately. The gate agent remained incredibly professional, which honestly impressed me. I probably would have laughed in his face by now, but she just nodded and reached for her phone. Meanwhile, the rest of us passengers were exchanging these incredulous looks. An elderly gentleman sitting next to me shook his head and muttered something about people these days. A fellow passenger whispered to me, asking seriously who this guy thought he was. Some kind of superhero. Another passenger grinned and said that in his mind he probably thought he was the most important person in the world. The businessman was pacing now, gesturing wildly and talking on his phone. I caught bits and pieces of his conversation. Something about a crucial meeting and how heads would roll. Classic overreaction stuff. When the supervisor arrived, the businessman launched into this whole dramatic speech about his importance and how the airline needed to accommodate him. The supervisor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, listened patiently before explaining the same thing the gate agent had already told him. That's when things got really weird. The businessman suddenly claimed he had a medical condition that required him to fly on time, insisting that they should give him special privileges because of it. The gate agent apologized if he truly had a medical condition, but explained that they couldn't make exceptions for individual cases. She emphasized that the airline had strict policies to ensure the safety and convenience of all passengers. A medical condition that requires flying on time? What kind of diagnosis is that? I was starting to wonder if his condition was chronic entitlement disorder. The businessman continued his plea, telling her she just didn't understand how important this was and that he would miss a crucial business meeting. The gate agent sympathized with his situation but again mentioned that they had other flights available later that day that might suit his schedule. The crowd was getting restless. Someone behind me shouted out, telling him to get over himself because we all had places to be. That seemed to trigger something in the businessman. Instead of taking a step back and maybe accepting reality, he decided to escalate things. He walked right up to the gate agent's computer and started jabbing at the screen, insisting there had to be a way to contact the plane and demanding that she push some buttons to do something. The gate agent asked him to step back and not touch the equipment, but he wasn't listening. He kept trying to get past the gate agent, like he was going to storm the jet bridge and somehow catch up to a plane that was probably already at 30,000 feet. He defiantly declared that she couldn't stop him from boarding his flight. The gate agent insisted that he step back, warning him that he was causing a disturbance and that she wouldn't hesitate to call security. And that's exactly what happened. Within minutes, 2 security guards showed up. They were calm but firm, clearly used to dealing with difficult passengers. One of the security guards told him that he needed to cooperate and leave the gate area peacefully. The businessman protested loudly, claiming they couldn't do this to him and that he knew his rights. The security guard acknowledged his concerns but explained that he was disrupting airport operations and needed to come with them. When they started to escort him away, the businessman launched into this epic tirade about lawsuits and what would happen next. He threatened to sue the airline, the airport, the gate agent, probably the pilot too for good measure. He kept shouting that they would all regret this. The security guards just nodded and kept walking. They'd probably heard it all before. But here's where it gets really good. When they were leading him away, one of the guards was talking into his radio. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough to understand that the businessman had been flagged in their system. Apparently, this wasn't his first airport meltdown. It turns out he'd been banned from flying with this particular airline for 6 months due to a previous incident. The gate agent discovered this when she ran his information through the system during all the commotion. So even if he'd made it to the gate on time, he wouldn't have been allowed on the plane anyway. The security guard came back a few minutes later to update the gate agent, and she announced to those of us still hanging around that the passenger was actually on their no-fly list. She explained that he wouldn't have been able to board even if he'd arrived on time. The irony was absolutely delicious. All that drama, all that entitlement, all those threats and demands, and he was banned from flying anyway. The whole thing had been pointless from the start. When I finally boarded my rescheduled flight a few hours later, I smiled. The businessman had gotten exactly what he deserved, a one-way ticket to reality, with a side of what he had coming. I bought this house right after I got my promotion at the accounting firm where I work. It's nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom place with a decent front yard that I've spent countless weekends perfecting. I take real pride in my lawn. It's green, properly edged, and I mow it every Saturday morning without fail. The neighborhood is pretty peaceful most of the time. We got the usual mix of young families, retirees, and working professionals like myself. Most people keep to themselves, but are friendly enough when you run into them at the mailbox. That's how I met my neighbor across the street when I first moved in. She seemed normal enough at first. This woman, let's call her Karen, has a small fluffy white dog named Fluffy. Cute dog, I'll give her that. The problem started about 6 months after I moved in. I began noticing little brown surprises scattered across my front lawn. At first, I figured it was just a stray dog or maybe a neighbor's pet had gotten loose. These things happen, right? But then I started noticing a pattern. Every morning when I left for work, there would be fresh dog poop on my lawn. Not just one pile, but multiple deposits. Like Fluffy had decided my grass was his personal toilet. I cleaned it up thinking it would stop, but it just kept happening day after day. One morning I was running late for work and stepped right into a fresh pile while rushing to my car. That was my breaking point. I decided I needed to have a conversation with Karen about this situation. I walked across the street and knocked on her door. She answered in her bathrobe, looking annoyed that someone had disturbed her morning routine. I introduced myself and explained that I needed to talk to her about her dog. She asked what about him with an attitude like I was bothering her for no reason. I told her that Fluffy had been using my front yard as his bathroom pretty regularly and asked if she could maybe walk him somewhere else or at least clean up after him. Her response was dismissive. She said that Fluffy was just being a dog and told me to let him be. I explained that I understood dogs need to go, but it was happening every single day, and I spent a lot of time and money maintaining my lawn. I mentioned that stepping in dog poop wasn't exactly how I wanted to start my mornings. Karen just shrugged and said that dogs go where they need to go and it's natural. I suggested that maybe not on other people's property, pointing out that there was a park just 2 blocks away. She scoffed and said she wasn't walking all the way to the park just so her dog could do his business, calling my suggestion ridiculous. And with that, she closed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment wondering if that conversation actually happened. Did she seriously just dismiss my completely reasonable request? I tried talking to her 2 more times over the next month. Each conversation went exactly the same way. She would brush off my concerns, make excuses, and act like I was being unreasonable for not wanting dog poop all over my yard. The situation was getting worse, not better. Some mornings I'd count 5 or 6 piles scattered around my lawn. My breaking point came on a particularly bad Tuesday morning. I'd worked late the night before finishing up some tax returns for clients, and I was already stressed about a big presentation I had to give that day. I walked outside to find that Fluffy had apparently had some kind of digestive issue overnight because there was dog poop everywhere. And I mean everywhere. My beautiful lawn looked like a minefield. I was furious. I've been patient. I've been reasonable. I tried to handle this like a civilized adult. But clearly, Karen wasn't interested in being civilized. Fine, 2 could play this game. I called in sick to work that day and spent the morning at the hardware store. I bought the biggest shovel they had and a box of heavy-duty gloves. If Karen wanted to play the game where her dog's bathroom habits were my problem, then I'd make sure she understood exactly what that meant. That afternoon, I put on my oldest clothes and those heavy-duty gloves. I went out to my lawn and carefully collected every single piece of dog poop I could find. I'm talking about weeks' worth of accumulated mess that I'd missed in my daily cleanups. I filled up 2 full garbage bags. Then I walked across the street to Karen's house. She had a nice little welcome mat in front of her door with some fake flowers in a pot beside it. I carefully arranged all of Fluffy's contributions right there on her doorstep, making sure to get some on that cute welcome mat of hers. I went back home and waited. I'd installed a doorbell camera a few months earlier after someone had been stealing packages in the neighborhood, and I had a perfect view of Karen's front door from my living room window. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and settled in to watch the show. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 10:37 in the morning, Karen came walking out of her house. She was dressed in her usual outfit, yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, with her hair in a messy bun. She had her phone pressed to her ear, ranting to someone about how the Homeowners Association needed to do something about people who don't maintain their properties because it was bringing down everyone's property values. She was so busy complaining into her phone that she wasn't watching where she was going. She stepped right onto her welcome mat, and her foot landed directly in the biggest pile of dog poop I'd left there. She screamed and started hopping around on one foot, asking how this disgusting mess got there. She tried to wipe her shoe on the edge of her doormat, but that just spread the mess around more. Then she attempted to steady herself by grabbing onto her fake flower pot, but she misjudged the distance and knocked it over. The pot crashed to the ground, and dirt scattered everywhere. That's when she completely lost her balance. She windmilled her arms trying to stay upright, but gravity had other plans. She fell backward and landed right in the middle of the remaining poop piles I'd arranged on her doorstep. I watched through my window and Karen sat there in shock, covered in her own dog's mess. Her phone had gone flying when she fell, and she was looking around like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. She yelled in frustration, struggling to get up, but every time she tried to push herself off the ground, she'd slip a little more. Her yoga pants were now decorated with brown stains, and she had poop in her hair. Finally, she managed to get to her feet and looked directly at my house. Even from across the street, I could see the rage in her eyes. She screamed that I had done this to her. I decided it was time to make my grand entrance. I walked out onto my front porch, coffee mug in hand, and gave her a little wave. I wished her a good morning and commented on what a beautiful day it was. She yelled back that I shouldn't dare act innocent because she knew I had put the dog poop there. I played dumb and asked what she was talking about, saying I was just enjoying my morning coffee on my own property. She screamed about the dog poop on her doorstep, insisting that I had put it there. I told her that was unfortunate and suggested she really should watch where she steps. I added that maybe it was time for Fluffy to learn some bathroom manners. She threatened that I was going to pay for this harassment, but I just said I was sorry she was having a rough morning and that I wasn't sure what she thought I had to do with her dog's bathroom habits. That's when her husband came outside to see what all the commotion was about. He took one look at his wife covered in dog poop and started laughing. He asked Karen what had happened to her, and she immediately blamed me, saying I had put dog poop on their doorstep and that I'd been harassing them. Her husband looked confused and asked who did what. Karen pointed at me and repeated that I was their neighbor and had been harassing them. Her husband looked over at me and I gave him a friendly wave. He walked over, stepping carefully around the mess on his doorstep. He asked me politely if I could tell him what was going on. I explained that I'd been trying to talk to his wife about Fluffy using my yard as his personal bathroom. I told him I'd asked her several times if she could clean up after him or walk him somewhere else, but she didn't seem interested in discussing it. He turned to Karen and asked if that was true. She got defensive and said I was being ridiculous because dogs go where they need to go. He asked if she really wasn't cleaning up after Fluffy when he went on other people's property, and she argued that she shouldn't have to because it's just nature. Her husband looked embarrassed. He turned back to me and apologized sincerely, saying he didn't know Fluffy was making a mess on my lawn. I told him I had tried to resolve it with her directly, but she wasn't interested in finding a solution. He turned back to Karen and told her that she needed to clean up after their dog and that she couldn't just let him do his business wherever he pleased. Karen asked whose side he was on, and he replied that he was on the side of being a decent neighbor. Karen was furious. She stomped into the house, leaving brown footprints behind her. Her husband spent the next 20 minutes cleaning up the mess on their doorstep while apologizing profusely to me. Over the next few days, I noticed a remarkable change in Fluffy's bathroom habits. Suddenly, he was no longer using my yard as his personal toilet. Karen would walk him down the street to the park, and when he did his business, she'd clean it up with little baggies. But Karen had one final card to play. About a week later, she knocked on my door with a folder full of papers. She announced that she was suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress and creating a hazardous condition on her property. I asked her what she was talking about, and she explained that I had deliberately set a trap for her and could have seriously injured her. I told her I didn't set any trap and had simply returned her dog's contributions to her property. She argued that it was entrapment, but I pointed out that I didn't think she understood what that word meant. She claimed she had witnesses and evidence, but I told her that actually, so did I. I showed her the footage from my doorbell camera. It clearly showed me collecting dog poop from my own lawn and moving it to her doorstep. It also showed her stepping in it completely by accident while she was distracted by her phone call. Karen insisted that the video didn't prove anything, but I explained that it proved she wasn't watching where she was going and that I was cleaning up after her dog since she refused to do it herself. Her husband appeared behind her and told Karen they should go home because she was embarrassing herself. She yelled that everyone was against her, but he told her that she had brought this on herself with her stubbornness. They went back to their house, and I never heard another word about the lawsuit. Karen still gives me dirty looks when she sees me, but Fluffy's bathroom habits have been perfectly civilized ever since. My lawn is finally poop-free, and I can walk to my car in the morning without having to navigate around landmines. I own a financial services and insurance company, and most of my work involves meeting with business owners who need the products I provide. These are usually big dollar deals, so I spend most of my time in my office, but occasionally I'll visit my top clients at their locations. I'm also a big guy, 450 pounds to be exact. I've learned to live with the stares and comments over the years, and honestly, they don't bother me much anymore. I'm proud of who I am, regardless of my size. So last Wednesday, I had to visit one of my best clients at his donut shop. This place is incredibly popular. There's literally a line around the building every single day. During the pandemic, that line stretched halfway around the block because of social distancing requirements. I arrived near the end of the morning rush, which was perfect timing. My client was just finishing up with the last few customers in line. He told me to set up my laptop and papers to the right of his register while he handled the remaining orders. I positioned myself away from both the donuts and the customer area, thinking nothing of it. After getting my materials ready, I was pulling up the information I needed for our meeting when my client went to the back to grab some fresh trays of donuts. He called out to the next customers in line that he'd be right back. That's when things got interesting. I heard someone clearing their throat loudly a couple of times. At first, I didn't think anything of it, figured they were just waiting for the owner to come back. But the throat clearing got more insistent, so I looked up to see who was making the noise. Standing there were a middle-aged couple, and they were staring directly at me. The woman had this expectant look on her face, like she was waiting for me to do something. Before I could even say anything, she blurted out that I should get up and help them. She said they just needed half a dozen glazed donuts and complained that the other guy had disappeared. I was honestly confused for a second, then realized what was happening. I politely explained that the owner had just gone back to grab some new trays of donuts and would be back in just a few minutes. I told her that since I didn't work there, I wouldn't have the first clue on how to help them. Karen literally laughed out loud, rolled her eyes, and shook her head. Then she looked at her husband with this expression that clearly said I was lying and just being lazy. Her husband then told me that they just needed 6 donuts and it would only take me 30 seconds to put them in a box and ring them up. He said I could go back to lounging on my stool after that. I tried to stay calm and polite. I explained again that I didn't work there and had no idea how to work the register. I emphasized that I really didn't work at the shop. Karen was now standing behind her husband, practically on her tiptoes, like she was trying to get him to escalate things. She demanded to know who my boss was and asked if it was the guy who went to get more donuts or if there was another manager. I tried one more time to explain the situation. I told her that I owned my own company and was there on personal business with the owner. I clarified that while the gentleman who went in the back was the owner, he wasn't my boss because I really didn't work there. That's when my client came back out with the fresh trays. He slid them into the display case and asked Karen and her husband if he could help them. Karen leaned forward, putting her hands and wrists on the counter, and let loose with the most insulting comment I'd heard in a while. She told him he should stop hiring lazy fat people who didn't want to help customers. She even asked if he paid me in crullers. My client looked completely confused, so I spoke up to explain what had happened. I told him that the woman thought I worked there because I was behind the counter. I explained that I tried to tell her I didn't work there, but apparently I was too fat and lazy not to work there. I mentioned that they wanted half a dozen of something. My client's expression changed immediately. He turned to Karen and her husband and asked if they had been rude to me. They started to speak, but before they could get far, 2 young women who had been standing in line behind them jumped in. The first woman said that these people had been absolutely awful and that they'd heard the whole thing. The second woman agreed, saying they had been so rude and mean to me when I was just trying to explain that I didn't work there. The 2 women proceeded to tell my client exactly what they'd witnessed, how Karen and her husband had been demanding and insulting, and how they'd made those terrible comments about my weight. After hearing their account, my client had heard enough. He told both Karen and her husband that he was going to have to ask them to leave and not come back. The husband wasn't quite ready to give up though. When they were walking toward the door, he turned back and sarcastically thanked me for my help. He called me a fat jerk and said he hoped I would have a heart attack before I turned 50. For the record, I'm 53, so that ship has already sailed. They finally left without any more drama, but I was honestly shaken by the whole encounter. The 2 young women who defended me came up afterward to make sure I was okay which really restored my faith in people. My client was incredibly apologetic about the whole situation. He couldn't believe someone would treat a customer, let alone anyone, that way in his establishment. He even offered me free donuts for life, though I told him that wasn't necessary. What I still don't understand is why some people refuse to believe you when you tell them you don't work somewhere. It's such a bizarre reaction. And now, of course, I keep thinking of all the perfect comebacks I could have used. But in the moment, I was too shocked to think of them. I guess if there's ever a next time, I'll be better prepared. Though honestly, I hope there isn't a next time. One encounter with people like Karen and her husband is more than enough for me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.